let's talk about Trugotronic. Old friends of yours, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean, that thing with, my introduction with Nelson, who runs Trugotronic, was Bastard Noise, when it was Eric Wood and Nelson, W.T. Nelson together. They did a tour at the Locust, and I was just like blown away. And then at the end of that tour, Nelson was like, "Hey, by the way, I have this other band, Geronimo. Here's a CD. We'd love to do a record on 31G." And that is to this day like one of my favorite records, because to me it's sort of like Mr. Oizo, but like more fucked up, less dancey, but just like the sounds. I'm like, oh my god, this is incredible.
Right.
And then Nelson's brilliant, and we'd always like rap, and he'd fix my Schumann, and then I was like, I need some Trogo stuff, and so then I would try so hard to integrate that shit into my pedal board. And the thing is, like, I found myself just like putting my bass down and just like it's all hands on, because he'd make shit with joysticks and stuff, and I was like, oh, I want a joystick that I can like move with my foot. But again, like you're not playing like a note, or it's not the right tone, or it's not the same every time, it's in not the right time, whatever. So like the oscillation is off or something, and so
right. Well, it's made for, he's probably thinking of it in terms of soundscape and noise and
sure,
like those,
or just like having a table with the effects and hands on. But it's funny because it's a stomp box, but like I literally couldn't play bass through that. I don't think. I just would have to go on the ground, and which was what I did for a long time. It was on my pedal board. I did use it at one point in the Locust, but more so in like interludes where there would be no drums or minimal drums, and then I would have time to mess with it and make something happen. But again,
what went right there?
There's nothing. There's a tube in there.
Oh, so it lights up.
Yeah, and it kind of like.
Can we plug it in?
Sure.
Cool.
Yeah. So this is the Trugotronic 667. I can't really explain it much more. And there's it's a tube pedal that Nelson made. I think it was like pretty early version of this. And again, like I think I like kind of started like really obsessing over Nelson's gear through Bastard Noise and then Geronimo. And so I was like, help me, and he fixed this, and so I was like, help me like get more crazy shit, and it was always like he had stuff with joysticks and shit, and I was like, it's like Atari, and like all these little things were like bringing me back. I was like, I want those noises. So he gave me this, and it was, I tried so hard to run my rig through it, and it was just not dependable as far as like playing a riff or a note. So again, I would just use it sporadically, but it's just like, and I don't even know this is a volume.
Not labeled.
I don't know what the fuck anything does. So he explained it to me at one point, but it didn't really, it like was in one ear and out the other.
Right.
So
yeah,
it's just it's like that kind of like shit that I was always like, yes.
So you would like, for instance, during a Locust set, you were saying interludes and stuff.
Yeah.
Drop down and
then just mess around with it for a while.
Twiddle some knobs.
Because we were trying to avoid the audience being able to communicate with us, because it was usually negative. So the thing was like, the song stops, and Gabe would need a break, and so we would kind of like write in interludes. And the weird kind of like thing about that was the Locust did a tour, and we were playing a festival, and that was kind of the point of the tour, and they had in the contract that we had to play for 45 minutes, and we didn't really want to bring any old material in, and we didn't want to write any new stuff, or we didn't have time to write new stuff. And so the whole plan was like, let's get Dave Stone in the band and have him do some noise. And so that was kind of like the inspiration for what we ended up writing Safety Second, Body Last. So we went from Plague Soundscapes, did the tour with Dave Stone, and then we got like this kind of like new perspective on space. It wasn't as dense, so we wrote Safety Second, and then after that, when we were touring, it was kind of like, let's bridge everything together, because Safety Second was kind of like different songs put together into one long 10-minute arrangement, but the goal was to make a whole 30 or 40-minute set that didn't stop at all. And so of course Gabe would have to stop, so I would just be like, let me do this, and there'd be like some kind of weird delayed guitar thing over it, and then we would just, no one could say anything to us, and
then just as a tangent, then what is the transition from that to New Erections sonically, and like what you guys were thinking as far as like writing, and now that you had discovered space, You know,
there was definitely a lot more attention to finding texture and melody. It wasn't as dense. It wasn't just like let's cram everything into these few seconds. It was kind of like, hey, let's let this breathe a minute. You know, there was a lot of mid-tempo stuff, and that I think that was just kind of like our goal. You know, and but even like on Plague Soundscapes, we were still like kind of like addressing like chunks of like little tiny soundscapes that would bridge songs together. So it was already kind of on our radar. I think that was why we brought Dave in, and we were just like, he can do it live, you know. And he was very theatrical. He'd have like the thunder sheet and stuff like that, and also it was like all of a sudden there's like, oh, there's like a really tall locust all, you know, in the band now, and that was kind of cool, you know, like, and so it's just like another element to add to that. So yeah, I mean, it was just like, and again, I mean, there's tons of other stuff that does this and everything, but it's how you present it, I guess, and how you can manipulate it.
Right. I always say it's when what's your choices are, like your taste, I guess, is what it is. So it's like, you know, there's a million pedals, and this dude right here, like, he'll hit something, and I go, fuck, I never thought to do that, but it's his taste choice. Like, he goes through it all, and then he lands on something, and you just go, oh, fuck, genius, you know? Yeah. And I think that really, you know, that's, anybody who I appreciate doing sound, it's because I just go, fuck, choice after choice is just money. You know what I mean? It's like, great choice, fuck, it sounds awesome. And, you know, gets me excited, you know?
Yeah, it almost doesn't matter what it is.
Right.
It doesn't matter what it is.
Right. You could pretty much like randomly like close your eyes and grab 3 pedals and then make it somehow fucked up.
Right.
Like not make it traditional, you know, and that's up here more than like there.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Well, that's the beauty of these things. I mean, that's what I hope, you know, this thing you guys are doing and what we're all doing, I hope that kind of turns into a new generation of weirdos.
Sure.
Well, that's what's funny about doing these videos too, is because the spirit is what you're saying. It's like, how do all of us use this stuff and make these special things out of it? The point is not to show these videos and people learn how to make those sounds, which that's a fun like side effect of it, but that is not the purpose of it. It's the sonic exploration and like what you can do.
You.
Yeah, exactly. As opposed to like, how do I get Justin Pearson sound on this fucking song or whatever? Cool, it's this setting on the purple pedal with the Schumann or whatever. I mean, that is a funny little thing that you get out of it, but like, that's not the purpose of it.
But it was crazy because I think the first time it really resonated with me was when I met Black Dice, and this was like the Gravity era when they were still like a hardcore band, and I was like, oh, that's cool, you know, you guys are on Gravity, like you like, you know, Antioch Arrow and, you know, these kind of bands, and they're like, no, we never even heard them before until like, I think at one point I remember talking to Bjorn, and he's like, I still haven't heard them, and I was like, what the fuck? Like, that is one of the most influential bands to me ever, you know, and I was like, that's crazy, you haven't heard them, and you're on that same label. And then I remember like tripping out on Black Dice and how like it was instrumentally like a hardcore band, but it's so abrasive and so fucked up, and you know, the way it was like the tones, and it was just, it was like, I don't even know, like, I don't want to say like junk, but it was like that kind of like, I don't know, it was nothing was smooth about it, you know, and it was, and also the theatrics live, but just sonically, like there was like a Black Dice 10-inch, and it says Black Dice spelled out in a shoestring on the cover. I think it was put out on Trouble Man or something. That 10-inch has such harsh noise on it for a regular 4-piece band, and I was like, fuck, that's the jam. You know, that's kind of like the coolest shit. And then you look at their lineage, and now they're completely electronic, almost dance music. And I'm like, fuck, that really makes so much sense, because when you look at it, they have like, I mean, their gear looks like they are at a swap meet. You know, it's like everything looks fucked up, and nothing looks arranged and clean. And I'm like, how do you do that same set? Like, how do you play that song again? It looks like just a mess. And I love that about it. You know, I think it's so brilliant. And I think those guys, the way their brains work is just so badass. And even Aaron Warren, he was the bass player, the second bass player of the band, but he was a bass player in Black Dice, doesn't even fucking touch the bass anymore. And I'm like, dude, you know, you were a ripping bass player, and now you're just doing crazy shit that's just as cool, you know?
And I love those kinds of bands that have that kind of lineage. I mean, there's not many of them, but I mean, the Boredoms come to mind.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
These bands who start with something and aren't precious about keeping any any of what they've done like intact. If they're not inspired by it, they
Yeah.
just go in this direction.
Yeah. Because if you-
individually and as a band.
You look at the two, like you look at Black Dice at the start and Black Dice now, it's a completely different band.
Completely different. And
But-
they went through all that psychedelic thing and all
Yeah.
these different.
But check this out though. This might be taboo, but like a good reference point would be the Beatles.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Absolutely.
you know, there's like
That
that.
might be the best reference point.
Yeah, but and people are like, you fucking brought the Beatles up, you know, like, like I'm supposed to be like a
Who do these guys
elitist like
think they are?
noise guy or whatever. And I'm like, dude, that shit was crazy. Like, I mean, just like hearing backwards drums was enough for me, you know. But like, it's a trip because when people like have that dumb argument, like Beatles or the Stones, you know, first of all, I don't think you can really. I think it's just weird to say that, but like. The Beatles, because they like really fucked a lot of stuff up in a good way, and you're like, wow, that's cool. Because then I figured like they were probably like maybe like them and like, you know, Syd Barrett. And there's a lot of artists that did it, but like they were the biggest that were just kind of like, we're gonna do weird shit now, and that was like the first time that it happened.
And like drag the rest of music and kind of culture and
Yeah.
everything with them.
Sure.
Like they
Yeah.
just made these moves, and it's like, well, you can either like it or not.
Yeah.
We don't care.